Well, thanks very much, Ed and Chris and Kit. We're now moving into the question and answer session. We've got a few questions in. Let me see. Max Sado says, could a digital twin prediction tool be useful for planning unknown futures, and that he's working on TfWM's one. Anybody like to talk about digital twins as a way of doing this? All right.
Yeah, I'll be happy to jump.
Chris, if you want to pile in on that one.
Yes, so I think digital twins are really important, and I think we've got probably similar aspirations to TfWM and other authorities to want to predict things before they happen. I think one of the challenges that we do find is that some of these new modes and some of the new things we're thinking about, we don't have the data behind them yet to understand how they're going to impact and how they're going to work. So as with others, we're trialing new services. You'll have heard that I've talked about us trialing demand responsive transport. And again, what we're trying to do through that is understand how it behaves differently in different areas. So we're doing a couple of showcases, one based around Warwick University, another one more in the centre of Coventry. But they'll operate different, they'll have different demand and different inputs. And then when you add in other micro mobility options, again, we're starting to see how that's growing. So I think digital twins do have a really important part to play, but I think getting the base data and that base learning into them in the first place can be quite a challenge.
Yes, I think there's a risk that digital twins are based on past trends and data rather than what's happening now. If you're not careful, you get the wrong answer. Here's a question which I think all of you might want to have a go at, from Dave Candleland. Do traffic restrictions such as 20-mile-an-hour zones play a part in encouraging modal shift? Kit, do you want to start on that one?
Absolutely. I mean, 20-mile-an-hour zones absolutely do. It would be really interesting to see how that interacts with with some of the work Chris is doing around driverless and autonomous vehicles, which of course will stick to the speed limit at all times. The electronic speed assist that's coming in from the European regulations about minimizing the amount of time that traffic can speed, because certainly the difference between a street where cars are actually doing 20 miles an hour and one that's just got signs on it is very, very interesting. Traffic restrictions that are just signs aren't terribly effective, but if they actually do have an impact on speeds or on traffic numbers, then they really do have a huge role in modal shift, not just in making it safe to create the space for people to walk, cycle or scoot, or to use any of the other modes, or indeed through creating by the fact that driving then becomes slower and less attractive, especially if it's a modal filter, so you've got to go round, take the long journey while the bus goes fast or the bike goes straight through. Not only are you creating a more attractive option in that sustainable choice, but you're also moving that trip off the network from the car perspective, reduces congestion, reduces traffic flow on other streets, therefore making that the bus journey is more reliable and that the bike journey is more pleasant as well. So restricting car traffic is absolutely a key element in ensuring modal shift. We can't just try and make everything better. We've also got to have a bit of carrot as well as a bit of stick as well as some carrot.
Chris, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying, Keith. I think one thing I would say though is it's not just 20-mile-an-hour zones. It's safe, and one thing we're learning through some of our future transport zone work and talking to people, it's also what's attractive. So if I'm going to cycle through somewhere, it could be 10 miles an hour and still be a completely unpleasant place for me to cycle or scoot through. So actually making it really friendly for active travel, friendly for walking, a place where you'd want to cycle, you'd want to walk, you'd want to scoot, is probably even more important. And then understanding how people make those decisions to make that trip.
I think that ties back quite interestingly to that original question on digital twin stuff, because that's where it gets really, really hard to try and model some of these perceptive things around, what makes a route nice to walk or cycle through, what makes a good place that's going to attract people. These are all qualitative judgments that we make day to day that are really hard to model and therefore are really hard to build into that kind of digital environment.
Ed, do you have further comments on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say I completely agree with both comments, and more so Chris in that In our experience with trials of cargo bikes and e-bikes across various boroughs of London, the results have been really interesting. And actually, just anecdotally, the most successful one that I always use as an example is the trial in Islington, where it's about, that they've got, I can't remember exactly how many, maybe they're low traffic neighbourhoods that they're looking to expand. And we conducted a trial with a food bank, actually, who delivered to around 200 homes. And they said it's considerably more efficient to go by bike or cargo bike. And I think it's the combination of reduced traffic speeds, making cycling or walking more attractive. It's about everyone working together to create a modal shift rather than just changing one thing. So, yeah, completely agree.
Thanks. A question from Mike Short. How can modes adopt more digital or connected options to allow for working in transit and away from base? Is this modal shift encouragement where lessons can be taken from the airline industry? Chris, do you want to start on that?
I think one thing I would say is I think there's really due to be a revolution here in digital and connected. I think we're starting to see that. I think even with the e-scooters we're seeing in the West Midlands, they're all connected now. We know where they are, we know what they're doing, we know how fast they're going. So everything is really important. What I would say as well, I think we've learnt from the pandemic that we probably always need to be connected. Broadband has become absolutely essential, and the speed of that we're seeing today with the some of the major internet sites going down, how reliant now we are on that. So I think people are going to expect to be able to work like this as we start to build back, as we start to use public transport and start to use those services. And I think we've seen with some of the, if you like, younger people who are less wedded to the car than maybe some of the older generation, is that they actually do enjoy doing that. They enjoy being connected, they enjoy working on their social networks, and will potentially choose a transport mode with a USB charger and Wi-Fi connectivity so they can actually do the things that they want to do. But it's still, I think, got to be back to what makes it an attractive service. So it's got to be a good enough thing to make it attractive and a pleasant place to be.
Ed, do you have views on this, on digital and connected?
Yeah, definitely. I think for Raleigh, we're looking at or exploring all sorts of different things, and absolutely digital is part of our future. App-based tracking for increased security, security and functionality of e-bikes is absolutely going to be the future. And I completely agree, Chris. Convenience is absolutely king, and I think I totally agree that yes, while we've got to change for the future and it'd be easier with a younger generation, it's about attracting the people that are willing to do so. And I think there's going to be big shift and big growth in public access share of all sorts of things. There's potential for public access cargo bikes within big urban centres. There's e-scooters obviously growing at a rapid pace, and the accessibility of those through app-based functions is definitely the future.
Kit, do you want to comment on this? Digital and connected options.
I think there's kind of sort of, there's three different tiers of what we're talking about here, which is there's the option where you can sit down on a bus or on a tram or something, some kind of mass transport vehicle, train, whatever it might be. And what you can essentially do is you can work, you can go on Facebook or whatever you want to do, Twitter, sit there and howl into the abyss or whatever it is people do. And you don't need to worry about anything because that the train or the bus is going to get you to where you want to go within a reliable journey time, and you can trust it, and that's great. There's then sort of the step down from that potentially, which is where you might have something like active travel, where you still got that direct, that through route, that reliability, that high speed kind of connectivity that you can rely on, but you probably shouldn't be reading your Twitter screen whilst you're cycling, because that would be pretty dangerous. And then you've got the bottom tier, which is going to be where the car sits, where you can't sit and have, despite Elon Musk's insistence that we're going to have enormous plasma TV screens in every single car. That's not a safe approach. If you're driving, you're going to be looking at stuff, you've got to be paying attention, and you're going the slow way round because you've got to go 3 sides of the square whilst the bus and the bike go the direct way. Again, it all feeds into that kind of discouraging the car as a mode, and because of its inherent inefficiencies, and instead making the other options more attractive. But I think it's really important that we don't just focus on that digital connectivity piece, because whilst it's really, really important that the bus or the tram has Wi-Fi and has access to these things so people can work, the most important thing, and the most, the biggest pull towards these other modes is still going to be an attractive service offer that comes regularly and is reliable and runs throughout the day.
Thanks. We've got a question from Jake Lettin, who said he found the graph that I think it was a kid put up about the space required for different travel modes very interesting. As a traffic signal engineer these days, there's a lot more focus on providing the best facilities for cyclists and pedestrians, etc. This is really hard to achieve for schemes where space is limited. And in these cases, he says, local authorities I've worked with seem to prioritise the car in these cases. How do we get over this hump? Kit, it sounds like a bit of combat you might have dealt with.
I've certainly done. I'm sure Ed's done battle on this, and Chris is doubtless there programming his traffic lights as he speaks. He's looking down there at his focus. It's a mind shift. There's a certain level at which, for the last 60 years, we've designed stuff around the car. We've all been brought up to design stuff around the car. It's only now, if you go to the Institute of Transport Studies or you go to a civil engineering course at university, they might even talk to you about other modes beyond rail. The two were road and rail, and never the twain shall meet. Trams, what an exciting continental concept. Buses, bikes, oh, what are they? So we're only just starting to overcome the fact that we've got this huge inertia in the industry, which is making this kind of designing for things trickier. And also, not design them, because what it might well be is that we've got some younger engineers coming in, people who've got the great ideas or who get it, and are putting designs into the pipeline. But of course, they're people who are approving them from a slightly different era. That's not to blame age or seniority entirely, but it's certainly an element of this. I think the key way of overcoming that hump is, like you said, that graph is amazing at demonstrating just the sheer inefficiency of the system we currently use. And I think it all comes back to sort of just explaining from first principles of what do we want our streets to be? Are they traffic sewers, or are they places for people to work and play and to do things on? Now, some streets will be one, some will be movement based, some will be place based. That's absolutely fine, and we need to do the right tool for the job. What we've spent the last 60 years doing is almost regardless of mode, as Ed was saying about the fact they used to have, huge articulated lorries coming in off the motorway, going all the way into the city centre of London and unloading there. What you do is, of course, you do maybe a train on that long leg, you do then a smaller van to a local distribution centre and a cargo bike for that last mile. What Chris is doing with the mass and mobility credits and what we're doing in terms of active travel is about using the right tool for the job. If you're going 1 mile down the road to buy a pint of milk, a bike will do you fine, or your feet. If you're going 20 miles into the Scottish Highlands, maybe you should hire a car. If you're going 40 miles an hour down the valley and there's a train line that goes there, get the train. It's about using the right tool for the job, and that applies to us as highway construction and transport planners people as well. So far, we've always tried to use the car to fix everything, and that's involved creating more space for cars, and it's actually ruined everything instead. So it turns out, didn't work very well. We should try again.
Ed, do you have views on traffic signal engineers and designing of highways?
Kit, that was so enthusiastic, but yeah, I love it. Really, really interesting. I'm fortunate enough to work on various projects here at Raleigh, and I think two things. One is we need this critical mass. So we need more cyclists to justify more infrastructure, more change. I completely agree that there are changes coming through, and we're living in a generation now who understand that, it's not that we want to make changes, that we need to make change for everyone's sake and the future and livable cities and all sorts of different positive reasons. I completely agree about the sort of different industries working together. But it goes beyond just urban environments. And one of the things that I'm really lucky to work on is various projects that are supplying free bikes to tackle inequalities. And that is absolutely vital. You know, there is a huge amount of the population that are inactive, and that a bike would benefit them in rural settings in terms of the opportunities that they might have, the health and well-being benefits. It expands massively, and I think there's that to consider as well. So it's not just the congestion and the health and well-being benefits of urban settings, and you know, decarbonisation and carbon emission reduction. It's about where active travel generally, and not just walking as well. Cycling, sorry, not just cycling, walking should be a part of that as well. How we really make a change, and all of the industries work together to make that change for the future.
Thanks. Chris, have you re-educated Transport for the West Midlands and the borough's highway engineers yet?
So I think I'll start off by saying I think we're a little bit behind the curve from some cities on our investment in cycling, but we're trying to catch up fast. So we are investing in cycle networks. So we think that's really important. We also have a lot of legacy. If there are signal engineers on, they'll know that the traffic signals are not the greatest things out there. There's a lot of legacy stuff, which makes things really hard to work with. But the thing I'd really like to pick up on is what Ed was saying about a critical mass. I think this is where we need to start to see things change. We've only just really started our cycle hire scheme in the West Midlands. Others have been going for many years now. So we're definitely not at critical mass. But what we have seen from our e-scooters work is a real explosion in the use of e-scooters. And actually, we've seen in Birmingham alone, the scheme expanded 3 times as a result of, you know, everyone started off cautious, then the city wanted to expand further, then further again. And I think we need to see this now, so people are seeing cycle and scooters and active travel as a much more important mode. And the way to do that is get much more of it out there.
Thanks very much. There's a couple of related questions that have come in. Ben Lawson asks, how does the panel suggest we demonstrate to car owners the other modes of travel available to them? And Mike Shorts asks, what green incentives should be applied to best affect modal shift in favour of both public transport and active travel? So it's kind of, how do we show car owners what's available to them, and what incentives to help them shift? Ed, do you want to pick that up first? Sure.
So a huge amount of my time is spent talking to businesses, organisations, big and small, that are looking to support staff in getting more active and you know, help with the whole decarbonisation of organisations. What that involves is getting electric bikes to staff or cargo bikes to businesses for low risk, no cost, try before you buy type operations. And for me, that's been really successful. And I think the way we're going to encourage it is exactly that, you know, having some sort of scheme that is relatively low risk and either no or very low cost, where people can access products. I'm talking bikes here, so rather selfishly, but e-scooters, it could work for lots of different industries, but definitely trying products is been really successful to cargo bikes and electric bikes.
Thanks. Incentives, Chris?
Yes, so we've done a couple of things. Many of you will be aware that we're trialling mobility credits, which is where we'll give you money to scrap your old car and then give you access to transport. Not all public transport. So yes, you do get your train, your tram and your bus, but access to bikes, scooters, car hire, car clubs, taxis. So again, encouraging people to do that. The jury is still out on how successful that is. The part of our work is really to follow those individuals and understand, do they feel it was a good idea for a few months and then do they go back to the car, or is that something that sticks, and what makes it stick? Obviously, giving somebody a mobility credit where there's no alternative isn't very helpful. So you've got to have the right mix of transport, the right modes available to them, and it's got to work for them in their lifestyle. I think some of our research has also shown there's some people that are going to be incredibly difficult to change. A lot of people will justify why they use the car, cost, convenience, but actually some of them just want to use the car. It's an emotional thing, it's an attitude thing, and those are the really hard people to reach. But we do think there are ways for those that we can reach to start to explore that. So with our so it talks about mobility credits, but we're also doing some work with demand responsive transport. And to start off, we've done the usual thing and say, well, it's free. Come and try it and come and see how it's used. And then we're starting now to charge for that service. And we're going to see how successful that's been, and whether that has attracted people to something where they can call the bus on the app and it comes to your corner and it will take you where you want to go. And just see, does that make the difference from a standard service bus? I've always said about a bus service, it takes you from where you don't want to start to where you don't want to go. What you really want is something that's door to door, something that's a bit more personalised. So again, we're going to be exploring DRT by actually speaking to people first and understanding what they need, what their needs are, what their behaviour is, what they're trying to do, and try and tailor those services to the individuals rather than just drop a service in and hope it's going to solve the problem. So we're hoping these things will introduce people to new forms of transport, and we hope this will be successful and move them away from the private single occupancy car.
Kit, letting people know about the alternatives and incentives for them to use them.
Absolutely, really important. I talked about the fact that there are 3 different stages to modal shift. There's the fact that we need to create the awareness that we need the space for safety for these other modes. We need to then put the infrastructure in place for these modes to be usable, be that a bus lane, be it EV charging, be it a bike lane. And then we also need to support people in making the decisions to shift modes and to try out new ones. I mean, what's really interesting is when we look at some of the stuff around low traffic neighborhoods like Ed was talking about in Islington, is that actually, if all we do is put a planter on a road and block it off, yes, that discourages people from driving and they might walk it. And if they happen to have a bike that is fixed and maintained and in the back shed that they can use, they might cycle more. But a lot of people, that's not necessarily what they do. They might need their bike to be maintained because it's not been touched for 3.5 years or 4 years since they last had an outing on it, and they went, oh, it's a bit dangerous, I don't like this very much. They might not know the geography of the local area particularly well, because even though you live there, if all you do is drive to and from your house, your mental map of that local area is entirely distorted by the roads that you've used by traffic. And you might think, oh, I don't want to walk anywhere. So you're looking at a whole host of stuff, from bike maintenance classes, getting your confidence back on a bike, led walks around the local neighborhood to link you from your street to the local school or whatever, where your kids go. Because actually, it turns out there's a direct cut-through route that you didn't know was there, because you normally drop them off in the car on the way. And then you're also looking at some other things as well, around potentially bike hangars for places to park bikes in the street, a cargo bike loan system, as Ed was talking about, for businesses to try out, or for families to try taking their kids to and from school in. You've got this whole suite of supporting modal shift that needs to happen around that. And what's, I think, quite interesting, and I really like about the mobility credits idea, is that obviously you then say, look, here's a whole suite of services you can get for roughly the same cost that you were paying for that car. Isn't this great? Look at all of that. And it's like, if we do think of LTNs as a trial, because that's how they should go in, is as a, look, we're going to try this, see what the impact is, we're going to play with them a bit, we're going to co-design them with you, and we're going to hopefully that you're going to understand the step change in the quality of life you're getting as a result of this. Then there's no reason why we couldn't say, look, actually, you're currently a 3-car household. One of those, Gillian Annabelle and a whole load at Institute for Transport Studies have done an amazing piece of work where they've looked at how cars are used during the week. And something like 13% of cars don't move in any given week. Mine certainly doesn't, not at the moment because of COVID. But, 17% of cars are only ever used at lunchtime for a quick dash to go and meet someone else for lunch. So many percentage are actually only used at school run. So you can sort of see how actually, but there's multiple car households, but that's because they need to have the cars for these little one-off trips that actually the LTN would enable. Well, suddenly then, how about if we say, we're going to bring an LTN to your area. We're going to put a cargo bike loan library in. We're going to put, a bike maintenance class of bikeability. We're going to lead you around. We're going to talk you. We're going to support you however we can, e-scooters, whatever it might be. But actually, in exchange for that, do you mind if we, take your car and park it over here for a while, outside the area for a bit? We'll valet it for you. You can have it, but just as an alternative for the thing where you don't need it. You put a car club vehicle on that street instead, and suddenly people start to really see the differences. Because one thing that I think has been quite interesting so far is that where we've done LTNs in London, Waltham Forest is a great example, car ownership does decline. As a result of the LTN going into place, it's quite clear people don't need the cars so much. And that's great. The trouble is that whilst the trial's going on for the 3 months or the 6 months that we're doing a trial, the streets are still jam full of parked cars. And you don't get that benefit of the fact that there's more street space, that there's safer, you can see more, you can cross the road more easily, your kids can play in it, you can see your neighbours across the road, all that stuff. So, well, if we can take those cars away for a little bit, just as a trial, and say, look, we'll look after it, we'll valet it, we'll make it nicer, we'll clean it for you. Then you get that benefit as well. And then at the end of it, you can say, oh, do you want your car back? Or, we can just bin it, and there's a car club vehicle there. You found that you used that, one time? How much did that cost you? 40 quid? Whatever, I don't know how much a car club costs. That's a terrible admission to make, but there we go. Sorry, Ben. We don't know what a car club costs for a single trip, but your membership and all that. 3 months, it would have cost you 1,200 quid in car running costs. So, there are lots of things that we can do to build on the infrastructure we're putting in place, and that behavior change element, that modal shift supporting stuff, is so important in helping people feel supported and trusting you to make another decision.
That's really helpful, and actually answers another question we had about addressing the downsides of the potential downside impacts of low traffic neighbourhoods. That basically the answer is you do lots of other things rather than just put planters in. Actually, I've always wondered why we don't make more of the Big Birmingham Bike project, which was a specific project, I think, in the south of Birmingham, Chris, which was tailored work with particularly Asian communities to give them bikes with trackers, so you could see what they were doing, and giving them lots of support and training in using the bikes, and I think maintenance as well. And that seemed to have a really big impact, and I suspect there's a lot more that could be done with projects like that. That was a really important one. We've got just a short time left. Yes, Hugh, John Carr has asked, weather does play a part, and on bad days bus operators report increased patronage as walkers and cyclists limit their exposure to wind and rain. Given the massive modal shifts that are necessary to achieve net zero, has any modelling been done to plot a transition path for each bus and active travel mode towards 2030? That's quite an interesting thing to work on. Kit, do you know of anybody doing those kinds of modelling, that kind of modelling, particularly on active travel?
I mean, it's really interesting in terms of active travel on the impact of weather, because where there are safe off-road paths that people feel comfortable on, actually the dip is significantly lower, but it is still there. People don't journey if it's raining. They might delay their trip till the rain stops. So I think there is modelling going on out there, although I haven't seen how you model that outside of bespoke academic models for that purpose. I mean, I'm sure Chris will be able to, is there something new and exciting that I don't know about in that regard? And I think with regards to the bus thing, there's actually a really important question, which is that if you look at the percentage of journeys that are currently taken by bus, and then we go, okay, we're going to have a 10% modal shift from car to active travel and a 10% modal shift from car to bus journey. If you had, our trains are already overcrowded, our buses are already full in the morning. If we had 10% of car drivers suddenly descend on public transport, it will completely overwhelm it. We do need to understand how we can structure that ramp up, and how we can therefore do that in tandem with the decline in car usership, because it is all about that important road space reallocation. We need to make sure that the buses have got the capacity and the space to maintain that reliability, and same with the bikes.
Ed, do you know about? Do you have a game plan for 2030 and what this means?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's not, the active travel, the bike, the cargo bike is not going to be the silver bullet. I think it's going to be, like I said, a combination of different forms of transport all working together. Although I have to say our European counterparts are pretty set up to ride in all sorts of different weathers, and I think this is just a personal feeling. I think a lot of it is confidence. You know, like Kit was saying, if you've got completely segregated cycle lanes, you still often see people cycling regardless of the weather. Naturally, we're going to get some seasonality, but then perhaps it's us, and maybe we need to adapt the product and adapt the story behind what to wear in those adverse conditions. So perhaps it's on us as manufacturers and suppliers as well to make changes.
Thank you. Chris, final comment.
Yes, I'll throw a challenge back to the modelers. I think the challenge isn't 2030, it's what the rest of us going to do over the next few years. How are we going to build back after the pandemic, and how's behaviour different? So I think there is an option now of working from home or working remotely, and perhaps there'll be a lot more of that. So maybe in severe weather, people don't travel but work from remotely. I know not everyone can do that. But I think the challenge really is, as a country, what are we going to do? How are we going to travel differently, and what does that look like for our transport networks and active travel at the same time?
Thank you very much. We're out of time. Sorry we couldn't get to the questions about cycle parking, road charging, and digital gaps on 4 and even 4G, let alone 5G. Thank you to all our speakers, to Ed, Kit and Chris, to the people who asked questions, to our sponsors, including Raleigh. We're going to be we'll be back tomorrow from 9:15 in the morning with a further packed agenda, a plenary session in the morning, and then a breakout session, two more lots of breakout sessions. Because of the international internet outage that affected us and lots of other people, we're going to make the presentations from today available after this afternoon, not as previously advertised tomorrow. So you will be able to access the presentations that have been put up that you've heard today, and indeed the ones that were in the other breakout sessions that you didn't attend. So, as I say, thank you to everybody who's spoken today, and to the people behind the scenes who've had to manage outages, internet outages, and hopefully we'll have a more trouble-free experience tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.